He kicked out his wife and spat on her at family dinner. Unaware she owned 90% of their company. The banquet hall was filled with chatter, silverware clinking, and polished smiles. Then silence struck like thunder, when Mark, standing at the head of the table, leaned across and spat directly into his wife Julia's face. "You disgust me," he roared, his voice echoing off the marble walls. "From this moment, you're no longer my wife. Pack your bags and leave tonight. You don't deserve a seat at this table." Around them, relatives shifted uncomfortably, some hiding smirks, others pretending not to see. No one spoke up. Not his mother, who nodded in approval. Not his cousin, who chuckled under his breath. Even Julia's supposed friends lowered their eyes, afraid to lose their place in Mark's circle. Julia's heart pounded, but she did not weep. She dabbed the spit from her cheek with a napkin, lifted her chin, and gave a faint smile that unsettled him. For inside her burned a secret that none of them knew. Mark believed he had destroyed her dignity in front of the world. What he did not know was that the woman he had just humiliated owned 90% of the company he bragged about. The empire he thought was his throne stood on ground that belonged to her. Tonight he spat on her. Tomorrow he would crawl at her feet. This is the story of betrayal turned into power, and humiliation reborn as justice. Before we continue, tell us where you are watching from in the comment section. Like, share, and subscribe to this channel. The grand dining room buzzed with laughter as waiters poured red wine into crystal glasses. Mark sat at the head of the table, his tie loosened, a smug grin plastered across his face. Julia sat quietly beside him, adjusting her simple blue dress, ignored by most of the guests. Then it happened. Mark slammed his fist on the table so hard that plates rattled. He stood, his voice sharp enough to silence the entire hall. "You've embarrassed me for the last time, Julia." His hand shot out, pointing straight at her. Before anyone could react, he leaned forward and spat across the table. The spit landed on her cheek. Gasps broke the room. Forks froze midair. Aunts, cousins, and business partners looked on in stunned disbelief. But no one moved. Julia blinked, her chest heaving. She slowly reached for her napkin, dabbing her cheek with a grace that only enraged him more. "You don't belong here," Mark sneered, his words dripping with venom. "You're a parasite living off my success. Tonight, in front of everyone, I strip you of the honor of being my wife. Pack your things and get out of my house." Whispers slithered around the table. His mother smirked, proud of her son's dominance. His cousin chuckled and clinked glasses with a friend, enjoying the spectacle. Even Julia's so-called best friend, Anna, looked away, pretending to reach for her drink, too cowardly to stand for her. Inside Julia, shame and fury wrestled, but her face showed only calm. Her silence was not weakness, it was defiance. Every cruel word, every mocking smirk carved itself into her memory like stone. Mark lifted his glass high, as though making a toast over her humiliation. "Here's to freedom. Here's to a wife who finally admits she's beneath me." Laughter broke out, awkward and forced, but no one dared oppose him. Julia rose to her feet, her chair scraping loudly against the polished floor. She steadied herself, her hands trembling, but her eyes locked with Mark's. For the first time, he felt a flicker of unease. "Are you deaf, Julia?" his mother barked. "Get out! You've wasted enough of our air." Julia gathered her dignity, turned slowly, and walked toward the door. Each step was heavier than the last, but her silence echoed louder than Mark's insults. The room buzzed again, mockery, whispers, cowardly giggles. Yet Julia heard none of it. She was already making a vow deep in her heart. This was not the end. As the door closed behind her, Mark leaned back in triumph, clinking his glass with Anna, who gave him a nervous smile. He didn't notice Julia's faint smirk as she left. For while he thought he had destroyed her, she had just made the quietest but most dangerous decision of her life. Outside in the cold night air, Julia whispered to herself, "One day, Mark, you'll regret spitting on me. And when that day comes, I won't need to raise my voice. The truth will destroy you. The night air bit at Julia's skin as she left the dinner hall, her heels clicking against the marble steps. The humiliation still burned, but in her silence, a strange calm settled over her. She had been spat on, cast out before family and friends, but she was not broken. Not yet. Her phone buzzed. Anna's name flashed across the screen. With trembling fingers, Julia answered. "Julia," Anna whispered, her voice dripping with feigned concern. "Are you okay? Mark didn't mean it like that. He's under so much stress. You know how men are." Julia closed her eyes, holding back a bitter laugh. "He spat on me, Anna, in front of everyone." "Oh, Julia, don't be so dramatic," Anna replied softly. "He's only frustrated. Maybe if you tried harder to support him, things would be different. Don't throw your marriage away over one heated moment." Gaslighting. Julia heard it clearly. Anna wasn't calling to comfort her. She was calling to make her doubt her own pain. Meanwhile, inside the house, Mark's mother clapped him on the back. "Well done, son. You showed her who holds the power. A wife should know her place." Mark grinned, basking in her approval. His cousin chimed in, "Julia never fit into this family anyway. She's lucky you kept her this long." Back in her car, Julia stared into the dark street. Betrayal surrounded her, not only from her husband, but from every institution around her. Family, friends, even the social circles that once pretended to respect her. They all backed Mark because he was loud, arrogant, and male. She, the quiet one, was easy to erase. But Julia refused to vanish. Her silence tonight was not weakness. It was strategy. She thought of the papers locked in her study drawer, the documents no one else cared about. Proof that 90% of the company was hers, inherited quietly from her late father, whose foresight she had barely understood at the time. She whispered into the darkness, "Patience, Julia. Not now. Not yet. But soon." Her driver glanced at her through the mirror, startled by the steel in her voice. He had never heard her sound like that. As the car rolled past the glowing city lights, Julia replayed Anna's words in her mind. "He didn't mean it like that. Don't be dramatic." Lies layered over cruelty. Even her so-called best friend had chosen Mark's side. Her hands tightened into fists. Tonight she had been the victim. But she would not remain the victim for long. The car pulled into her driveway. A shadow waited at her door. Mark himself, drunk on arrogance, ready to twist the knife deeper. He hadn't finished with her humiliation yet. The porch light cast a pale glow as Julia stepped out of the car. Standing at the doorway, Mark leaned casually against the wall, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his tie loose, his smirk cruel. "So," he sneered, slurring slightly, "still playing the victim? You think anyone cares about your little pouty face? They laughed with me tonight, Julia. You saw it. Even your friend Anna. They're on my side." Julia's heart clenched, but she kept her face calm. "I don't want to fight, Mark. I just want peace." He laughed, stepping closer. "Peace? You're nothing without me. You live in this house because of me. You wear those dresses because of me. You sit at my table because I allow it. Don't ever forget that." Behind the words lay manipulation. He wanted her to crumble, to doubt herself, to cling to him despite the abuse. Later that night, Julia's phone buzzed again. Anna's name flashed across the screen. Julia hesitated before answering. "Julia," Anna said, her tone syrupy sweet, "I just wanted to check on you again. You know I care. I only want what's best for you. Don't leave Mark. You'd regret it. Men like him, they always come around." But Julia caught the hesitation in Anna's voice, a pause, a softness that wasn't for her. She remembered the way Anna's eyes lingered on Mark during the dinner, the way her hand brushed his arm a second too long. Seeds of temptation. Seeds of betrayal. "Thank you, Anna," Julia replied, forcing her voice flat. "I'll keep that in mind." The moment the call ended, Julia let out a shaky breath. The mask of loyalty was clear. Anna was no friend. She was circling like a vulture, waiting for Julia to fall so she could take her place. The next morning, Mark's cousin Samuel stopped Julia in the hallway. He leaned close, his voice low and taunting. "Don't take last night too hard, Julia. Mark's just under pressure. You know how businessmen are. Besides," he smirked, "if you can't handle him, there are plenty of others who will." His words were a dagger cloaked in sympathy. Everyone around her wore masks of loyalty, of care, of support. But beneath them lay manipulation, greed, and betrayal. Julia's silence remained her only shield. She had to wait. She had to endure. But as she stood alone in her room, the papers hidden in her drawer seemed to whisper to her, "You are stronger than they know." That night, Julia walked into the study and caught Anna's reflection in the glass cabinet. Snooping through her things, searching for secrets that didn't belong to her. Julia froze in the doorway of the study. The faint glow from the desk lamp lit Anna's face, her hands rifling through drawers. Papers shifted, folders opened, and Julia's heart hammered as she saw Anna's fingers pause dangerously close to the sealed envelope that carried the truth of her inheritance. "Anna," Julia's voice sliced through the silence. Anna jerked upright, her face flushing, a nervous laugh escaping. "Oh, Julia, I was just looking for a pen. Mark said—" Julia's eyes narrowed. "Mark said what?" Before Anna could answer, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Mark appeared, his shirt unbuttoned at the top, his glass of whiskey refilled. His eyes flicked from Julia to Anna, and a sly grin spread across his lips. "Julia, don't be so suspicious," Mark said smoothly, draping his arm around Anna's shoulders. "She's just trying to help me with some documents. You've been so distracted lately. Anna has been a real support." The warmth in his tone wasn't for Julia, it was for Anna. A calculated grooming, a deliberate seduction, and Julia saw it clearly. Anna lowered her gaze, pretending to blush, but her lips twitched with a smile she tried to hide. Julia stepped closer, her voice steady. "Support? Is that what you call sneaking into my study behind my back?" Mark chuckled, sipping his drink. "Don't overreact, Julia. Anna cares about me, about us. She sees how much pressure I'm under. Not like you, always sulking, always making me look bad. Maybe you could learn something from her." Anna's hand brushed Mark's arm in a gesture that was both innocent and intimate. Julia's stomach turned, but she forced her face into calm stillness. "You're right," Julia whispered. "I've learned more than you realize." Mark mistook her quiet for surrender. Anna mistook it for weakness. Both believed Julia was blind. But Julia's silence was gathering into a storm. Later that night, as Mark and Anna lingered in the living room laughing together, Julia sat alone in her room, staring at the sealed envelope in her drawer. Inside lay her father's legacy, the truth that would crush their arrogance. She could reveal it now, but she chose not to. Not yet. Justice delayed would be justice doubled. Downstairs, Mark's mother entered, her sharp voice praising Anna. "You're such a bright young woman, Anna. Mark deserves someone like you by his side. Julia never fit this family." Julia, listening from the staircase, pressed her hand against the wall to steady herself. Betrayal had fully taken root. Grooming, seduction, and whispered approval had already begun weaving the net against her. But nets can break. Julia turned back toward her room, whispering under her breath, "They think I'm powerless. But the day I open these papers, every smile at my expense will turn to ashes." The house was quiet after midnight. The laughter of Mark and Anna had finally faded into the walls, leaving only the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Julia sat at her desk, the sealed envelope before her. Her fingers brushed across it gently, as if touching the key to her freedom. She pulled it open, the crisp sound breaking the silence. Inside were documents bearing her father's signature, notarized and stamped. 90% of the company's shares, hers. The empire Mark boasted about was, in truth, her inheritance. Julia read the papers over and over, the words burning into her mind. She could walk into the boardroom tomorrow, reveal everything, and strip Mark of his power in one stroke. But she didn't. She closed the envelope again, slipping it back into its hiding place. "Not yet," she whispered. "Justice comes sweeter when it ripens." The next morning, Mark swaggered into the dining room, Anna trailing behind with a forced smile of sympathy. "Julia," Mark said loudly, "I've decided you'll be moving out of the master bedroom. Anna deserves to stay closer to me. You can take the guest room upstairs." Gasps fluttered among the household staff. Julia simply nodded, her face calm. Her silence unnerved him, but he masked it with arrogance. Later, as Samuel dropped by, he clapped Mark on the back and sneered toward Julia. "You've done the right thing, cousin. Julia was never strong enough for you. But be careful. Quiet ones can be dangerous." Julia caught his gaze. "Thank you for the advice," she said softly, her tone carrying a weight Samuel couldn't quite place. In her room, Julia began to write. A journal. Each entry documented every insult, every betrayal, every witness to her humiliation. Not because she needed proof for herself, but because one day those words would read like an indictment. When Anna peeked into her room later that night, pretending to offer comfort, Julia smiled faintly. "Don't worry about me. I'm stronger than I look." Anna blinked, unsettled by the calm certainty in her voice. Downstairs, the staff whispered quietly as they cleared the table. "She doesn't cry. She doesn't break. She just waits," one said. "Like she knows something we don't." And she did. Julia's silence was her shield. Her patience was her weapon. Her secrecy was the rope that would one day tighten around Mark's pride until it snapped. Alone in her room, Julia pressed her hand against the drawer hiding the envelope. At that exact moment, Mark's footsteps thundered up the stairs, and the doorknob to her room began to turn. The ballroom shimmered with gold lights, velvet curtains, and the hum of expensive laughter. Mark strutted across the stage in his navy suit, Anna at his side in a glittering red dress. Cameras flashed. Applause erupted. It was the company's annual gala, and Mark was soaking up every ounce of attention like a king feeding on worship. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed into the microphone, raising his glass, "tonight we celebrate not just our success, but the future. Under my leadership, this company will expand into territories no one else dares touch. Risks? Bah! Risk is the path to glory." The crowd cheered politely, though Julia noticed the uneasy glances among the board members seated near the front. They shifted in their chairs, whispering about reckless spending and expansion. But none dared challenge him in public. His hubris cast a shadow that silenced common sense. Julia sat quietly at a corner table, dressed in elegant black, unnoticed by most. Her calm eyes watched everything. Mark's swagger, Anna's staged smile, Samuel whispering into the ears of directors about bold investments. They all fed his ego like priests feeding an idol. Behind the mask of applause, cracks widened. One director muttered, "This isn't sustainable." Another whispered, "If only we had the power to stop him." Julia's lips curved in the faintest smile. "You do. You just don't know it yet." On stage, Mark pointed dramatically toward Anna. "And let us thank my dear friend Anna for her endless support. She has been by my side through every storm." Gasps and murmurs stirred the room. The insult was obvious. Julia, his wife, sat ignored while the mistress was glorified. Yet she remained still, sipping her wine, her silence louder than applause. Anna beamed, but Julia noticed her hands trembling as she held her glass. Being flaunted publicly carried its own cost. After the speeches, Samuel approached Julia, smirking. "Quite a show, isn't it? Mark's unstoppable. He's already planning 3 new ventures. You really should step aside before you embarrass yourself further." Julia tilted her head. "Unstoppable, you say?" Her calm tone made him falter. "Funny. I thought unstoppable men didn't need cheerleaders whispering in their ear." His smirk faded. For the first time, Julia saw unease flicker in his eyes. Meanwhile, in the boardroom whispers that followed the gala, concern deepened. Directors exchanged wary looks. some glancing at Julia as if sensing she carried a secret. Mark, however, basked in the limelight, blind to the storm brewing under his feet. His pride swelled, his arrogance soared, and Julia watched, recording every word, every boast, every reckless promise. The higher he climbed, the harder his fall would be. As Julia left the gala hall, she passed two directors, whispering, "If only someone had authority to stop him." Julia's faint smile returned. Soon, they would know she was that someone. The morning after the gala, Julia sat alone in the sunroom, the newspaper folded neatly in her lap. The headlines praised Mark's bold vision and fearless expansion. The photos showed him beaming beside Anna, her red dress glittering under chandeliers. Julia stared at the smiling image, her face unreadable. Mark stormed into the room, tossing his jacket onto a chair. His eyes glowed with self-satisfaction. "Did you see the coverage? The city knows I'm unstoppable. Investors are lining up. And you?" he sneered. "You just sat there last night like a shadow. Pathetic." Julia folded the paper carefully, her voice even. "I had nothing to prove." He laughed, mocking. "Nothing to prove? You have nothing, Julia. No voice, no wealth, no power. I'm filing for divorce, and when I do, you'll walk away with nothing but shame. Anna will stand beside me, not you." Her chest tightened, but she kept her composure. "Is that what you want?" she asked softly. "What I want," Mark growled, stepping closer, "is freedom. You've held me back long enough. A man like me deserves better than you." At that moment, Anna appeared in the doorway, her eyes wide, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Mark, maybe you're being too harsh. Julia's just adjusting. Change is hard for her." But Julia caught the gleam in Anna's eyes. This was no defense. It was performance, designed to make her look fragile, incapable, unworthy. Mark's cousin Samuel joined in, grinning slyly. "He's right, Julia. Divorce might be best. Better for everyone." Julia's fingers curled against her lap. Their voices wove a net around her. Surface empathy from Anna. Opportunistic whispers from Samuel. Threats from Mark. They thought she would break, beg, plead. Instead, she lifted her chin. "If that's the road you choose, Mark, I won't stand in your way." His eyes narrowed, surprised by her calm. "You should be terrified, Julia. I've already spoken with my lawyer. Once the papers are ready, you'll be nothing but a memory." Julia stood, her voice steady. Sometimes memories outlast empires. She walked past him, leaving him frozen in confusion. Anna and Samuel exchanged glances, unsure what to make of her composure. Later that night, Julia pulled the sealed envelope from her drawer, laying it across her desk. Her hand hovered over it, tempted to reveal everything now. But she stopped. Timing was everything. Let them believe in her weakness a little longer. Just then, her phone buzzed. A message from Mark's lawyer. "Meeting scheduled tomorrow morning. Divorce papers will be prepared." Julia smiled faintly, whispering, "Good. Let's see who walks away with nothing." The boardroom gleamed with polished oak and shining glass. Mark strutted to the head of the table, slamming his briefcase down with the confidence of a king about to deliver commandments. Julia sat quietly near the end, her presence ignored, her silence mistaken for irrelevance. "Gentlemen," Mark began, spreading his arms wide, "we are about to secure our place in history. Expansion into 3 continents at once. Aggressive. Risky. But that's what makes it genius. Bold men win. Timid men rot." The board members shifted nervously. One cleared his throat. "Mr. Daniels, the debt we'd have to take on—" Mark cut him off with a laugh. "Debt is fuel! You're thinking too small. Look at me. Everything I touch turns to gold." He pointed toward Anna, who sat primly in the back, smiling as though rehearsed. "And with the right people by my side, I cannot fail." Julia watched quietly, her eyes fixed on the directors. Their discomfort was clear. their whispers hushed. They knew his arrogance was dangerous, but none dared stop him. Dramatic irony filled the air, for while Mark boasted of power and ownership, the true weight of the company rested in Julia's locked drawer at home. 90%, hidden, unacknowledged, yet absolute. Samuel leaned over and whispered in Julia's ear, smug. "Do you see how unstoppable he is? Even the board trembles. You're finished, Julia." She turned her head slowly, meeting his smirk with calm eyes. "Samuel, tell me, have you ever seen a man build a castle on sand?" He frowned, confused. Her words unsettled him, but he quickly laughed it off. "You'll see. Mark's castle will stand forever." Mark wrapped up his presentation with dramatic flair, raising his fist high. "The future belongs to those who dare, and I dare everything." The room erupted into reluctant applause, half-hearted clapping masked as enthusiasm. Julia sipped her water, her face unreadable. To the board, she was invisible. To Mark, she was defeated. To Anna, she was already erased. But Julia carried a secret smile within her. Every boast Mark made was a rope tightening around his own neck. Every reckless word added weight to his eventual fall. The blind spot was his undoing. He believed she had no power. He believed the company was his throne. He believed loyalty was on his side. What he did not believe, and could not imagine, was that the quiet woman sitting at the end of the table owned him, and everything he claimed to rule. As the meeting adjourned, a director slipped Julia a folded note under the table. She opened it later in her lap. 5 words stared back at her. "Do you hold the key?" The living room glowed with firelight as Mark's family gathered for an evening celebration. Wine flowed, laughter echoed, but beneath it all simmered cruelty. Julia sat quietly on the edge of the couch, her hands folded in her lap, surrounded by faces that wore smiles sharper than knives. Mark raised his glass, smirking. "To family, who stand by you through everything. Unlike some people who drag us down." His eyes flicked toward Julia, and the room erupted with chuckles. Anna leaned forward with a sympathetic pout. "Oh, Mark, don't be so harsh. Julia tries her best. It's not her fault, she's delicate." Her tone dripped with sugar, but her words were poison. Mark's mother chimed in, "Delicate? Please, she's weak, always has been. I warned you, son. Julia was never fit for a man of your stature." Samuel added his sneer. "A woman like Julia would never survive in our world. She's lucky Mark kept her this long. Without him, she'd be forgotten in a week." The group chuckled, their laughter bouncing around Julia like stones hurled in a circle. Every voice worked in unison, mockery, shaming, character assassination. Julia's chest tightened, but her face remained still. Her silence unnerved them, though they mistook it for defeat. Inside, however, she felt each insult carve itself into her resolve like a chisel shaping stone. Mark leaned back, wrapping his arm around Anna. "She should be grateful. I gave her a name, a life, a seat at this table. Without me, she's nothing." Anna's hand rested delicately on his shoulder, her smile victorious. Samuel raised his glass again. "To Mark, the man who deserves better." The clique laughed louder, emboldened by their shared cruelty. Julia's eyes swept the room, her supposed friend betraying her, her husband flaunting arrogance, his mother fueling disdain, his cousin whispering poison. But Julia noticed something else. The staff who lingered at the edges, carrying trays and clearing glasses. Their faces were still, their eyes averted, but Julia caught one maid's glance, a quick flicker of sympathy. Silent witnesses, quiet recorders of truth. Julia stood slowly, her movements drawing the room's attention. "You've made yourselves clear," she said softly. "But remember this, every table turns. Every chair changes hands. And when it does, we'll see who still has a seat." The room fell silent for a heartbeat before Mark burst into laughter, joined by the others. "Listen to her. She thinks she's threatening us. Pathetic." They laughed harder, mocking her until the sound felt like thunder pressing against her ears. Julia walked toward the door, her steps steady. As she reached for the handle, she heard Anna's voice behind her, hushed but sharp. "She'll be gone soon, and when she is, I'll be the one they raise their glasses to." The boardroom was packed tighter than ever. Directors sat stiffly in their chairs, shareholders filled the side rows, and guests whispered in anticipation. Mark stood proudly at the head, his voice booming like a preacher at his pulpit. Anna beamed at his side, Samuel whispering encouragement in his ear, his mother nodding with smug pride. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mark declared, "today I make it official. The divorce papers are nearly complete. Julia is no longer part of my future. With her gone, nothing holds me back. I alone will take this company to the stars." Applause rippled, awkward but present. Julia sat at the far end of the table, dressed simply in a navy dress, her face calm, her hands resting lightly on a leather folder. A director cleared his throat nervously. "Mr. Daniels, before we proceed with this expansion, we need to confirm shareholder approval. Your controlling stake must—" Mark waved him off. "Controlling stake? Don't insult me! This company is mine." He puffed his chest, glaring down the table. "Julia here has no claim. She was just a wife, not a partner. Nothing belongs to her." The words landed like a slap across Julia's face. But instead of lowering her head, she rose slowly to her feet. The room stilled. Even Mark faltered for half a second. "Are you certain, Mark?" Julia's voice carried, calm and steady. "Are you sure nothing belongs to me?" Mark barked out a laugh. "Of course. You have nothing." Julia placed the leather folder on the table and slid it toward the directors. "Gentlemen, inside this folder are legal documents signed by my late father and verified by compliance. 90% of this company belongs to me. Not Mark. Me." Gasps exploded across the room. Directors scrambled for the papers, flipping through stamped pages, signatures, official seals. Their eyes widened. Murmurs rippled like waves. Mark's smirk shattered. "Lies! This is forged." The company secretary stood, adjusting his glasses. "These documents are legitimate. Verified, signed, and registered years ago. Julia Daniels is the majority shareholder." The board erupted in whispers. 90%! She owns everything. She can remove him. Julia straightened, her eyes on Mark. "You spat on me in front of family. You humiliated me, mocked me, discarded me. You thought I was powerless. But today, in front of this board, I strip you of the title you abused. Effective immediately, you are no longer CEO." The directors nodded, their voices joining one by one until the chorus became unanimous. "Agreed, removed, done." Mark's face drained of color. Anna shifted uncomfortably in her chair, slipping her hand from his arm. Samuel sat frozen, his smirk collapsing. Even Mark's mother's voice cracked. This can't be." Julia leaned forward, her tone final. "The empire you bragged about was never yours, Mark. It was mine. And now, I take it back." Mark collapsed into his chair, clutching the table for support. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Julia, you wouldn't do this to me." But Julia's calm eyes held no mercy. "I already have." The boardroom was silent except for the sound of Mark's shallow breathing. He slumped in his chair, his once proud shoulders sagging, his hands gripping the edge of the table like a drowning man clinging to driftwood. The board members, one by one, turned away from him. Their allegiance had shifted in a single stroke. Julia stood at the center now, the leather folder tucked beneath her arm. She wasn't shouting, she wasn't boasting. Her voice was calm, steady, a melody that carried more weight than any of Mark's roars ever had. "This company," she began, "was built on trust, on integrity, on hard work. My father left me this legacy not to be squandered by arrogance, but to be grown with wisdom. I will honor that." The directors nodded. "We will support you," one said firmly. Another added, "Your leadership is what we need." Their words confirmed what the documents had already declared. Julia was now the recognized head. Across the table, Anna slowly slid her chair back. She glanced at Mark, but his head was bowed in shame, his eyes glassy. Without his power, he was nothing to her. Quietly, she slipped out the side door, abandoning him without a word. Samuel tried to speak, his voice trembling. "Julia, I didn't mean—" Julia cut him off with a single glance. "You meant every word you said when you mocked me, and you will live with the memory of it." Samuel sank into silence. Mark's mother rose shakily, pointing a trembling finger at Julia. "You can't do this. He's my son. He deserves respect." Julia's eyes softened, but her words were unyielding. "Respect is not inherited. It is earned, and Mark lost it the moment he spat on me in front of everyone. Today I choose dignity over cruelty. This company will not be ruled by arrogance any longer." The staff outside the boardroom whispered as Julia passed. Some smiled faintly, others bowed their heads. For years, they had lived under Mark's shadow, walking on eggshells. Today, they saw a new dawn. Julia paused at the door, turning back one last time. Power does not mean domination. True power is the strength to stand firm with grace. That is how I will lead. Mark looked up then, his eyes red, his voice breaking. "Julia, please, don't leave me like this. Give me another chance." Her heart tightened. This was the man who had spat on her, mocked her, discarded her. Now he begged, broken and small. Julia stepped closer, her voice quiet but cutting. "I forgive you, Mark, but forgiveness does not mean return. You chose your path, and now you must walk it." She turned and walked out, the doors closing behind her with finality. Outside, as the golden morning light spilled across the lobby, Julia lifted her head high. The empire was hers, her dignity restored, and for the first time in years, she felt truly free. The morning after her stunning takeover, Julia walked into the company headquarters, not as the humiliated wife everyone once pitied, but as the rightful majority owner. The building seemed to buzz differently. Staff who once avoided her gaze now straightened and greeted her with respect. "Good morning, Mrs. Daniels," the receptionist said softly, almost reverently. Julia smiled, not with arrogance, but with calm warmth. "Good morning, Sarah. Thank you." In the boardroom, directors rose to their feet when she entered. "Mrs. Daniels," one of them said, "your father would be proud. We're ready to follow your lead." Julia set down her folder and looked around the room. "We will rebuild trust. No more reckless risks, no more decisions made to feed one man's pride. We'll reinvest in our people, our workers, our communities. A company's true strength lies in those who build it from the ground up." The directors nodded, relief visible in their faces. For years, they had lived under Mark's bluster and arrogance. Now they saw hope. Meanwhile, down the hall, Mark lingered like a ghost, ignored and irrelevant. Staff passed by without greeting him. Anna's absence was louder than words. She had vanished from his side as if she'd never existed. His once commanding presence had shrunk into a hollow shell. Julia toured the offices, speaking with employees. She listened more than she spoke. She shook hands, asked about their work, their families. Her humility disarmed them, her sincerity inspired them. Slowly, word spread through the company. Julia wasn't just an owner, she was a leader. Later that week, she stood at a press conference. Cameras flashed. Journalists leaned forward as she spoke into the microphone. "This company," Julia said firmly, "is not just a business. It is a legacy of fairness, of dignity, of opportunity. I will not lead with cruelty or arrogance. I will lead with justice. Together, we rise." The applause was thunderous, louder and more genuine than any Mark had ever received. Back in his empty office, Mark sat slumped at his desk, staring at old newspaper clippings of his so-called victories. His reflection in the glass looked nothing like the king he once imagined himself to be. For the first time, he realized the truth. His empire had never been his. It had always belonged to Julia. But Julia didn't dwell on his downfall. Her eyes were fixed forward, on growth, on fairness, on legacy. She had been humiliated, spat upon, mocked, betrayed. Yet, from the ashes of that humiliation, she had risen stronger than ever. That evening, as Julia returned home, she found Mark waiting on the porch in the cold rain, his suit rumpled, his eyes desperate. He dropped to his knees before her. "Julia, I can't live without you, please! Take me back!" The rain poured hard, drenching the porch as Julia stepped from her car. There, kneeling in the puddles, was Mark. His suit clung to his body, soaked and rumpled, his once-groomed hair plastered to his forehead. The man who had once spat on her in front of family now bowed in the mud before her. "Julia," his voice cracked, trembling like a broken child. "Please, forgive me. I was a fool. I don't want Anna. I don't want the company. I just want you. Take me back. I'll change, I promise." Julia stood under her umbrella, watching him. The neighbors across the street peeked from behind curtains. 2 staff members on their way out stopped in the driveway, whispering to each other, stunned. The scene was undeniable. Mark Daniels, the arrogant king, reduced to a beggar. "Stand up, Mark," Julia said softly. "You're humiliating yourself." He shook his head violently, clutching at her dress hem. "No, I deserve this. I deserve worse. I spat on you. I cursed you. I betrayed you. But please, don't leave me like this. Give me one more chance." Memories flashed through Julia's mind. The dinner table spit, Anna sneaking in her study, Samuel's sneers, his mother's cruel words. Every humiliation pressed on her heart like thorns. And yet, she remained calm. "Do you remember the night you spat on me?" Julia asked quietly. Mark froze. "Julia, please, you told me I was nothing, that without you I was worthless." Her eyes locked with his, steady and sharp. "And now? Who is nothing, Mark? Who is worthless?" He sobbed openly, collapsing at her feet. "Me, I am. But I can change, Julia. I'll be a better man if you just give me one chance." Julia bent down slightly, her tone gentle but unyielding. "Mark, love is not begging. Love is not cruelty. Love is not arrogance. You killed what we had when you chose to humiliate me for applause." His hands trembled as he reached for her. "Please, I'll do anything." "Anything." The staff exchanged glances. One whispered, "This is justice. She doesn't even need to raise her voice." Julia pulled her hand free and stepped back. "I forgive you, Mark, but forgiveness is not the same as return. You've lost me. You've lost the company. You've lost the right to call yourself my husband." Her words cut deeper than any slap. Mark collapsed fully to the ground, his sobs drowned out by the rain. Julia turned toward the door. As she stepped inside, she whispered to herself, "Humiliation began at a dinner table. Tonight, it ends on my doorstep." And she closed the door behind her, leaving Mark in the storm. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the boardroom as Julia addressed the directors once more. There was no tension now, no nervous glances or whispered doubts. The atmosphere had shifted entirely. Calm, respectful, hopeful. "Gentlemen and ladies," Julia began, her voice steady, "we've survived arrogance, recklessness, and betrayal. Now we build anew. Our foundation will not be pride, but dignity. Not cruelty, but fairness. We will invest in people, not just profits." The directors applauded warmly, relief clear in their eyes. They had been shackled by Mark's hubris. Julia's vision freed them. After the meeting, Julia walked through the open office floor. Employees stood as she passed, some applauding, some smiling with genuine gratitude. A young accountant stopped her nervously. "Mrs. Daniels, thank you for giving us hope again." Julia's smile was gentle. "No, thank you. Without your work, this company has no heartbeat. Together, we'll make sure no one here ever feels discarded." Her words rippled through the office like sunlight breaking after a storm. That evening, Julia stood in her garden, the air filled with the scent of blooming roses. She knelt to water them, her hands steady, her face peaceful. For years she had tended this garden quietly. finding solace while enduring Mark's cruelty. Now, it symbolized something new. Her rebirth. From behind the fence, she heard voices. Neighbors whispered about the change. "Did you see her? She commands the company now. Mark is finished." Another voice replied, "She carries herself like a queen, but with kindness." Julia didn't turn to correct them. She didn't need a crown. Her dignity was enough. Inside the house, Mark sat alone in the guest room, a shadow of himself. He stared at the walls, ignored, stripped of power, begging for scraps of the life he once mocked. Julia passed his door without pause. She had no desire for revenge and cruelty. His downfall was punishment enough. Instead, she opened the front door to greet the staff returning from errands. She thanked them by name, asked about their families. Small gestures, but ones that built loyalty stronger than any contract. Later, she sat at her desk, opening her journal. She wrote the final words of her private record. "They spat on me. They mocked me. They thought I was powerless. Today I walk in dignity, and they kneel in the dust." Justice is complete. As she set down her pen, a knock came at the door. Julia rose, already knowing who it was. Mark stood outside once again, his face pale, his hands trembling, his voice breaking. "Julia, I have nothing left. Please, don't let me die alone." The evening air was cool as Julia opened the door. Mark stood on the porch, gaunt and broken. His once polished shoes were scuffed, his suit wrinkled beyond recognition. The proud man who had once spat on her at the family dinner table now trembled like a child, clinging to the last thread of hope. "Julia," he whispered, his voice hoarse, "I have nothing left. No company, no friends. Anna's gone. Even my family has turned their backs on me. You're all I have. Please, don't let me die alone." Julia studied him for a long moment. Memories flashed before her. The spit on her cheek, the laughter of his family, the whispers of betrayal, the circle of wolves mocking her. And then, the moment she had risen, folder in hand, turning humiliation into power. She stepped outside, letting the door rest gently behind her. "Mark," she said softly, "I don't hate you. Hatred only chains me to the past. I've forgiven you." Hope flickered in his eyes. Then you'll take me back?" Julia shook her head gently, her voice calm but resolute. "Forgiveness does not mean return. I've moved forward. My life is no longer yours to break. You had your chance, and you destroyed it. What's left now is only pity." Mark's face crumpled, his knees buckling. He fell onto the steps, sobbing openly. The man who once ruled with arrogance now wept in the dirt, stripped of every illusion of power. Julia bent slightly, her eyes kind but unwavering. "You taught me something, Mark. You showed me what cruelty looks like. And because of that, I chose to live by its opposite. I will lead with grace, with justice, with dignity. That is my legacy, not you." She straightened, lifting her chin toward the dark sky. "Goodbye, Mark. May you find peace one day, far from me." With that, she turned and walked back inside, closing the door gently but firmly. Mark remained on the porch, his cries echoing into the night, unheard and unanswered. Inside, Julia stood in the quiet warmth of her home. She touched the folder on her desk, then looked out toward her blooming garden. She had been humiliated, spat on, cast out as worthless. But now she was whole, strong, and free. The story had ended not with vengeance, but with dignity. Not with cruelty, but with grace. And that was the sweetest victory of all.